Emily had always been fascinated by firearms. From a young age, she admired the discipline, precision, and focus that came with handling a gun properly. Unlike many of her friends, she didn't see guns as weapons to be feared, but as tools that required skill, respect, and knowledge. That morning, she decided it was finally time to take her interest seriously. She wanted to buy her very first rifle, and for weeks she had researched everything about rifles, the types, calibers, ammunition, scopes, and safety rules. Today, she felt ready to step into the real world and handle a firearm herself. She pushed open the door of the local gun store, a place she had often passed by but never entered. The bell above the door jingled softly, announcing her arrival. The store smelled of gun oil, leather, and polished wood, a scent that was strangely comforting to her. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Emily had imagined this moment countless times. Walking confidently into a store, choosing a firearm, asking questions, and learning from experts. But reality was always a little different. As soon as she walked in, she noticed the curious looks of the staff and customers. She was young, barely in her early 20s, dressed casually in jeans and a hoodie. Her hair was pulled back, and she carried herself with quiet confidence. But the store seemed to have an unspoken rule. Anyone who looked young and female was automatically assumed to know nothing about guns. A few men in the corner whispered and chuckled, exchanging smirks as if betting on how long it would take for her to make a mistake. Emily felt their eyes on her, heavy with doubt, but she refused to let it shake her. She took a deep breath and reminded herself why she was here. She was not here to impress anyone. She was here to learn and to prove, mostly to herself, that she belonged. She moved slowly through the aisles, her hands brushing against polished rifles and neatly arranged ammunition boxes. Each gun seemed to tell a story, and she imagined the discipline and focus it must take to handle them well. A store employee noticed her and walked over with a friendly, if slightly condescending, smile. "Can I help you find something?" he asked, clearly expecting her to fumble. "Yes, I'm looking for a hunting rifle, preferably a .308 caliber," Emily said calmly, using the precise terminology she had memorized. The man raised an eyebrow and let out a small laugh. "Oh, a young lady going hunting? That's cute. You sure you know what you're doing?" Emily felt a flicker of irritation but didn't respond angrily. Instead, she smiled politely. "Yes, I've done a lot of research. I'm familiar with different calibers, scopes, and recoil management. I'd like to see the options you have available." The man chuckled again, clearly amused. A few other customers overheard and started whispering, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others outright laughing. Emily could feel their judgment pressing down on her, like a weight trying to push her out. She ignored them, focusing instead on the rifles displayed on the wall. She examined each one carefully, noting the weight, balance, and craftsmanship. Her knowledge allowed her to recognize quality immediately, and she found herself drawn to one particular rifle, a sleek, well-balanced piece with a smooth trigger pull and a sturdy stock. As she picked it up, she handled it with care, checking the safety mechanism and the sight alignment. She moved naturally, almost instinctively, as if she had been doing this for years. Some people in the store started to murmur among themselves, noticing her confidence. But a few still rolled their eyes, certain that her appearance would eventually betray her lack of experience. Emily wasn't here to fight perceptions, but she felt a small thrill knowing that she was already standing out. She could feel a spark of satisfaction at being taken seriously, even if just for a moment. She reminded herself that confidence came from knowledge, and knowledge came from preparation. Every hour she had spent reading, watching tutorials, and practicing dry handling at home was paying off right now. She wasn't just a young woman in a gun store. She was someone who understood what she was doing and had come prepared. She moved to the ammunition section, carefully selecting a box that matched her chosen rifle. A man nearby scoffed and muttered, "Bet she doesn't even know how to load that properly." Emily simply smiled, unbothered. This moment was not about proving anyone else wrong. It was about proving herself right. By the time she approached the counter, she had the rifle in one hand and the ammunition in the other. Her posture was calm, her eyes steady. She knew this was only the beginning, but for Emily, stepping into that gun store and facing the whispers, the smirks, and the doubt was the first true step toward proving her skill, her patience, and her passion. As Emily stood at the counter with her rifle and ammunition, she could feel the eyes of the store staff and other customers on her. Whispers filled the room, some curious, some mocking. A few of the men exchanged smirks, clearly entertained by what they assumed was a young woman out of her depth. One of the staff members leaned casually against the counter, his smile polite but faintly condescending. "Are you sure you know how to handle that?" he asked, his tone more teasing than helpful. "It's not a toy, you know." Emily looked him in the eye calmly, unflinching. "I know it's not a toy," she replied, her voice steady. "I've studied rifles extensively. I understand the mechanics, the safety protocols, and how to operate it properly. I'd like to see the different models you have and discuss their features." The staff member raised an eyebrow, clearly expecting her to falter, but she didn't. A few nearby customers laughed quietly, thinking she might crumble under the pressure. But Emily had prepared for this, not just the technical knowledge but the mental resilience. She had watched countless hours of tutorials, read manuals, and practiced handling similar rifles at home under strict safety conditions. She wasn't just here to buy a gun. She was here to prove that knowledge and preparation matter more than appearances. She picked up a sleek .308 rifle from the display. Its polished wood stock and smooth metallic barrel gleamed under the store's lights. Most of the customers had never paid this much attention to a firearm, but Emily examined every detail, the trigger pull, the balance, the sighting mechanism. She demonstrated proper handling as she moved it through her hands with ease, showing careful attention to safety at every step. She pointed out the safety catch, explaining its function and the best practices for engaging it. Some customers leaned closer, curiosity replacing their amusement, as her calm confidence began to challenge their assumptions. "Notice how the weight is distributed," she said quietly but clearly, addressing no one in particular. "It allows for better stability when aiming, and the recoil is manageable because of the stock design, which is crucial for both accuracy and safety." A few heads turned, surprised at the level of understanding in someone so young. Still, a few skeptics remained, shaking their heads in disbelief. One man chuckled, muttering under his breath, "Bet she's never fired a real round." Emily simply smiled inwardly. She didn't need to prove anything right this second. She knew her knowledge and skill would do that for her in time. Then she began asking questions of her own, showing that her understanding wasn't just theoretical. She asked about the differences in scope magnification, the types of ammunition available for the rifle, and even inquired about the best way to clean and maintain it. The staff member blinked, clearly caught off guard. He had expected simple questions, maybe some fumbling, but instead, he found himself in a conversation that required actual expertise. Emily continued to demonstrate her knowledge, carefully showing how to hold the rifle correctly, the proper stance for shooting, and the importance of breathing control when aiming. Some customers began to whisper among themselves, clearly impressed. A few of the men who had been laughing earlier looked embarrassed, realizing they had underestimated her. Despite the growing attention, Emily remained calm. She wasn't seeking approval or admiration. She was focused on the rifle, on the techniques, and on handling herself with confidence. Each gesture, each explanation was deliberate, showing her preparation and respect for the firearm. The staff member, now noticeably more respectful, handed her a few brochures and technical sheets, encouraging her to read further about the rifles she was interested in. Emily carefully studied them, pointing out details that most people would overlook, such as the barrel twist rate and its effect on bullet trajectory. Her understanding went beyond casual knowledge. She spoke like someone who had devoted hours, even years, to mastering the basics. By now, the mood in the store had shifted. The laughter and smirks had mostly disappeared, replaced by curiosity and, in some cases, admiration. People were beginning to see Emily not as a young woman out of her depth, but as someone who had clearly earned the right to be there. Still, she didn't let this change her. She remained humble and focused, knowing that true respect is earned through action, not words. Even the most skeptical customer, a tall man who had been openly mocking her earlier, now watched quietly, clearly intrigued by her knowledge and confidence. He muttered under his breath, "I didn't think she knew that much." Emily didn't respond. She didn't need to. The proof was in her calm demeanor and her careful, competent handling of the rifle. By the time she finished discussing the rifle and ammunition, Emily had already shifted the atmosphere in the store. The mockery that had greeted her on arrival had faded into quiet respect. She had shown that knowledge, preparation, and composure could turn doubt into acknowledgement. Though the day was far from over, and there would be more challenges ahead, Emily had taken the first big step in proving herself. Not just to others, but to herself. By this point, Emily had already turned a few heads in the store. The initial laughter and whispers had started to fade, replaced by curiosity and, for some, surprise. But she knew that knowledge alone wasn't enough. People respected skill, and today she was determined to show hers. The challenge wasn't just the rifles. It was the skepticism she faced from almost everyone around her. She could feel it lingering in the air, like a silent test, and she was ready. Emily carefully laid the rifle on the counter and began examining it more closely. She checked the sight alignment, the trigger mechanism, and the safety features with precision. Every movement was deliberate, calm, and methodical. She wanted the people around her to see that handling a firearm wasn't about strength or intimidation. It was about control, focus, and respect for the tool. "Let's start with the basics," she said quietly, almost to herself, but the words carried clearly across the store. Proper stance is the foundation of accurate shooting. You need to balance your weight, keep your shoulders steady, and control your breathing. She positioned her feet carefully and demonstrated a stance that minimized recoil while maintaining stability. Even those who had been openly mocking her couldn't help but watch, silently noting the precision in her posture. Next, she picked up the rifle again and demonstrated how to shoulder it correctly. Her movements were smooth and natural, reflecting hours of practice. "The way you hold it affects everything, the aim, the recoil, and the follow-up shot," she explained, pointing out small adjustments that could make a big difference. The staff member, who had been skeptical before, now leaned closer, asking questions he probably wouldn't have considered asking earlier. Emily then moved on to showing how to use the scope. She explained the difference between a 4x and 12x magnification, how wind and distance affect the bullet's trajectory, and the importance of adjusting for elevation. Her voice was calm, informative, and confident. For someone who had been underestimated from the moment she walked in, it was a small but powerful victory to have people listening so attentively. A few men who had been snickering earlier exchanged uneasy glances. They were realizing that she wasn't just a young woman in a gun store. She was someone who clearly knew her craft. But Emily didn't stop to revel in their surprise. She focused on the task at hand, demonstrating skill and maintaining safety. She explained how to load the rifle, how to check the chamber, and how to keep the finger off the trigger until ready to fire. She emphasized that safety was always the most important part of handling a firearm. Some customers were now leaning on the counters, captivated. They asked questions she hadn't anticipated, such as the difference between types of gunpowder and how temperature could affect a shot. Emily answered them all with calm confidence, providing examples and demonstrating with her hands when necessary. Each answer further established her credibility. The mocking whispers had nearly disappeared, replaced by murmurs of admiration. To really prove her point, Emily asked if anyone in the store would like to test her skill. A few hesitating voices suggested they didn't think she could actually hit a target with precision. Smiling inwardly, she accepted the challenge. She set up a small demonstration target near the range section of the store. Every step she took was deliberate, showing she understood the weight, recoil, and mechanics of her chosen rifle. As she raised the rifle and aimed, the store seemed to hold its breath. Emily adjusted her scope, controlled her breathing, and slowly squeezed the trigger. The bullet hit the bullseye perfectly. A small cheer broke out, though some people tried to hide their amazement. She adjusted for the next shot and hit the target again, demonstrating consistency. The skill that had been doubted moments ago was now undeniable. The staff member who had laughed at her earlier was speechless. He nodded, finally acknowledging her skill without a word. Emily didn't gloat. She didn't need to. The results spoke louder than any argument or explanation could. Even the most skeptical customers began to understand that her competence wasn't an accident. It was the result of preparation, knowledge, and focus. By the time Emily stepped back from the target, the atmosphere in the store had completely shifted. The laughter and doubt that had greeted her earlier were gone. In their place was respect. Quiet, cautious, but unmistakable. People were talking among themselves, pointing out how impressive it was that someone so young could command such skill. Emily smiled politely, thanked the staff for their time, and reminded herself that the day wasn't over. There was still more to come, more challenges, and perhaps even more recognition from people who truly mattered. Emily had proven in that short time that appearances could be deceiving. Her age and gender didn't define her skill. Her preparation, knowledge, and composure did. As she packed up her rifle and ammunition, she felt a quiet pride. Not because she had silenced the mockers, but because she had demonstrated that true competence always speaks for itself, no matter what anyone else thinks. By now, Emily had captured the attention of nearly everyone in the store. The whispers of doubt had mostly disappeared, replaced by murmurs of curiosity and a grudging respect. But she knew that being noticed wasn't the same as being believed in. Some people still doubted her abilities and wanted proof, real proof beyond words and explanations. She sensed the challenge coming, and she was ready to face it. The store manager, a tall man with years of experience handling firearms, finally stepped forward. His expression was serious, a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "You've shown us you know a lot about guns," he said. "But knowing facts isn't the same as handling one properly. If you really understand this rifle, prove it. Show me that you can handle it safely and accurately under real conditions." Emily didn't hesitate. She had anticipated this challenge. "I'm ready," she said, her voice calm and steady. She knew that this was the moment when respect would either be earned or lost. She had the knowledge, she had the skill, and most importantly, she had her focus. The manager led her to a small range section at the back of the store. It wasn't a full outdoor range, but it was enough to demonstrate accuracy and control. Emily carefully unpacked the rifle and laid out her ammunition. Every movement was deliberate, precise, and careful. She handled the rifle with respect, checking the safety, inspecting the chamber, and ensuring everything was in order before she even considered aiming. "Remember," she said quietly, more to herself than to anyone else. "Safety first always." Her words were simple, but they carried weight. Handling a firearm wasn't just about hitting the target. It was about control, responsibility, and respect. The manager watched closely as she assumed a proper stance. Her feet were shoulder-width apart, knees slightly bent, and body balanced. She held the rifle firmly against her shoulder, her cheek resting lightly on the stock for stability. She adjusted the scope carefully, taking into account the distance to the target and imagining the trajectory. Her breathing was slow and controlled, a technique she had practiced countless times at home. The first shot rang out, and it hit the center of the target perfectly. The sound echoed through the store, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. A few people gasped quietly. Even some of the skeptics looked impressed, though they tried to hide it. Emily didn't celebrate. She simply lowered the rifle, checked the safety, and prepared for the next shot. "Excellent form," the manager said, his tone more approving than before. "But consistency matters. Can you maintain it over several rounds?" Emily nodded. She had practiced not just one perfect shot, but sequences of them. She adjusted her stance slightly, recalculated her aim, and fired again. Another bullseye. And again and again. Each shot was precise, consistent, and controlled. The small range became a demonstration of skill, discipline, and calm under pressure. The people who had doubted her earlier began to murmur among themselves. "I didn't think she could do that. Look at that control. She's better than I expected." Emily overheard some of these comments but didn't let them distract her. Her focus remained on the rifle, the target, and the process. She knew that true mastery required total concentration, not attention to what others thought. As she finished the final round, she lowered the rifle carefully, engaging the safety before setting it down. She turned to the manager, who now looked genuinely impressed. "I'll admit," he said, nodding slowly, "I underestimated you. That was exceptional handling, especially under observation." Emily gave a small smile, her pride quiet but present. She didn't need to gloat or boast. The proof was clear. She had handled the challenge perfectly, with calm, skill, and precision. The mockery that had greeted her upon entering the store was now a distant memory, replaced by respect earned through action. Some customers approached her with questions about technique and practice, genuinely interested in learning from her. Others simply watched in awe, realizing that she had broken the assumptions they had made based on her appearance. Emily answered each question patiently, emphasizing the importance of knowledge, safety, and practice. The manager stepped back, allowing her to finish at her own pace. He knew now that she was not just a young woman curious about guns. She was someone who had clearly studied, practiced, and mastered the basics. Her skill spoke louder than any argument could have. As she packed up her rifle and ammunition, Emily felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. This moment wasn't about proving the doubters wrong. It was about proving to herself that she could rise to any challenge with preparation, focus, and respect for what she was doing. She had faced skepticism, handled the pressure, and demonstrated skill in a way that could not be ignored. Little did Emily know, this was just the beginning. While she had earned respect from the staff and a few customers, an even greater recognition was about to arrive. Someone whose approval would mean far more than any casual observer. The store door jingled again, and a figure entered that would change everything. Emily had just finished demonstrating her skill to the store manager. The mockery she had faced upon entering the store had faded, replaced with cautious respect from staff and a few curious onlookers. She felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. Her preparation, knowledge, and calm focus had carried her through the test. But she didn't know that the most important moment of the day was about to happen, one that would elevate her recognition far beyond anything she had yet received. The store bell jingled as the front door opened again. A tall, commanding figure entered, immediately catching the attention of everyone in the room. The man wore a military uniform, adorned with badges and insignia that marked him as someone of high rank and experience. He carried himself with quiet authority, moving with the kind of confidence that only comes from years of leadership and discipline. The atmosphere in the store shifted instantly. Conversations hushed, and people straightened instinctively. Emily glanced up and instinctively felt a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. She had heard of the commander, a respected figure known for his expertise in firearms, strategy, and mentoring young talent. He had visited the store before on rare occasions, but Emily had never expected to encounter him today. Her heart beat a little faster, not from fear, but from the sense that this was a moment that mattered. The commander's eyes scanned the room, and they settled on Emily. He noticed the rifle in her hands and the confident, poised way she had been handling it. For a brief moment, the world seemed to pause. He approached slowly, each step deliberate, his gaze focused yet observant. Emily felt his presence without turning away, maintaining the same calm composure she had demonstrated throughout her time in the store. "Good afternoon," the commander said, his voice firm but welcoming. "I couldn't help but notice your handling of that rifle. May I ask how long you've been practicing?" Emily straightened slightly, surprised but not intimidated. "Good afternoon, sir," she replied respectfully. "I've been studying and practicing for a few years now. I've spent countless hours learning about rifles, safety, and marksmanship. I'm still learning every day, but I focus on discipline and proper technique." The commander nodded slowly, a hint of a smile on his face. "Discipline and technique are what separate a good shooter from a great one," he said. His tone carried authority but also genuine interest. He walked closer, observing her stance, her grip, and the care with which she handled the rifle. Emily remained calm, knowing that this was not the time to be distracted or flustered. He asked her a few technical questions about the rifle, the type of ammunition she was using, how she adjusted for distance, and how she managed recoil. Emily answered confidently, explaining each detail with clarity and precision. The commander listened carefully, nodding at her responses. It became clear that her knowledge wasn't just superficial. She understood her weapon, her practice, and the principles behind every action she took. Other customers watched in awe. The same people who had laughed and whispered when she first walked in were now silent, clearly impressed. Some exchanged glances, whispering to one another about how remarkable her skill and composure were. Even the store staff seemed a little starstruck, realizing that Emily had not only proven herself to them, but had now earned the attention of someone they all respected. After a few minutes, the commander stepped closer and raised his hand in a formal salute. It was a gesture of respect, recognition, and approval, an acknowledgement that Emily had demonstrated the skill, knowledge, and discipline worthy of recognition. The salute was brief but meaningful, and it spoke volumes. Emily returned it respectfully, her heart swelling with a quiet pride. She had faced doubt, ridicule, and skepticism, yet here she was, earning respect from one of the most respected figures in the firearms and military community. The moment shifted the energy in the store completely. Conversations buzzed quietly with admiration, and a few people even clapped softly, as if recognizing the significance of what had just happened. The mocking and skepticism that had greeted Emily at the door were gone. In their place was recognition and respect, not just from the commander, but from everyone who had witnessed the interaction. The commander spent a few more minutes observing Emily, asking questions about her practice routines and techniques. She answered thoughtfully, sharing insights that reflected both her experience and her dedication. By the time he finally left the store, he had made it clear to everyone present that Emily's skill and composure were exceptional. Her quiet confidence and preparation had earned recognition that went far beyond the typical acknowledgement a young shooter might receive. Emily felt a mix of humility and pride. She had not sought this recognition, and yet she had earned it through dedication, focus, and respect for her craft. The experience reinforced her belief that true skill speaks louder than assumptions, appearances, or gossip. She had faced every challenge with patience and calm, and now the commander's acknowledgement served as proof that her efforts mattered. As the commander walked out, the store returned to normal, but the energy had changed forever. Customers whispered about Emily's skill, staff shared their admiration, and Emily herself felt a quiet, unshakable confidence. She knew this was a moment she would remember for the rest of her life, not because of the applause or attention, but because she had faced doubt, persevered, and been recognized for her true ability. The commander's salute had left an impression that no one in the store could ignore. Emily had already proven her skill through knowledge, precision, and calm composure, but now the recognition from a respected authority added weight to her accomplishments. The people who had laughed at her earlier were quiet, uncertain, some even a little embarrassed by how wrong they had been. The energy in the store had shifted completely, and Emily noticed it with a quiet sense of satisfaction. She didn't feel pride in the way of boasting. She simply knew she had earned respect where before there had been doubt. The staff and customers alike were observing her differently now. The same man who had chuckled at her first request for a rifle stepped forward. His demeanor changed. There was no trace of condescension in his tone. I didn't realize you knew so much about firearms," he admitted, sounding somewhat awkward. "You've clearly studied this thoroughly." Emily gave a small, polite smile. "I have," she said simply. "I take firearms very seriously. Knowledge and practice are important. Handling a gun isn't about showing off. It's about responsibility, safety, and discipline." Her words had an impact. People who had been skeptical were now listening with genuine interest. A few young men approached her, cautiously asking questions about techniques and practice routines. She answered each patiently, sharing advice on grip, stance, and breathing control. Even the most hesitant observers were intrigued. Emily had gone from being mocked to becoming a teacher in the eyes of those who had doubted her just moments ago. One older customer, who had rolled his eyes when she walked in, now shook his head in amazement. "I've been handling rifles for decades," he said quietly to a friend, "and I haven't seen anyone that young command a rifle with this kind of focus and skill." The comment echoed in Emily's ears, but she remained humble, focusing on her movements and maintaining control over the firearm as she continued demonstrating techniques to anyone willing to watch. The commander, still in the store, had not left. He observed quietly from a corner, occasionally nodding or smiling approvingly. His presence alone made it clear that Emily's abilities were respected at the highest level. She didn't need to prove anything further. Her performance had spoken louder than words, and the commander's acknowledgement was a public seal of that accomplishment. Emily took a moment to address the remaining skeptics directly. She explained the importance of preparation before even picking up a rifle. Studying the firearm, practicing stance, learning safety protocols, and understanding ballistics. Her explanations were clear, simple, and practical, yet carried a depth of knowledge that only came from experience. People began taking notes mentally, asking more thoughtful questions, and even the previously mocking customers were now engaged. Then she offered a small challenge to demonstrate consistency. Setting up a few practice targets near the range section, Emily showed how a skilled shooter could maintain accuracy under observation. Each shot hit the target perfectly, one after another. The precision was impressive, but what stood out even more was her composure. She handled the rifle calmly, engaging the safety each time and moving deliberately. The demonstration was not a display of arrogance. It was a teaching moment, showing that skill and discipline come from knowledge and careful practice. The energy in the store had completely transformed. The people who had once whispered and laughed were now quietly observing, asking questions, and even complimenting her skill. The staff, who had been skeptical at first, looked genuinely impressed. And through it all, Emily remained humble, polite, and focused. She knew that respect earned through demonstration was far more valuable than praise given out of politeness. The commander finally approached her again, this time with a few words of encouragement. "You've done exceptionally well today," he said. "It's rare to see someone so young handle a firearm with this level of skill and discipline. You have the knowledge, the focus, and the calm that every great shooter must have. Keep practicing and you'll go far." Emily nodded respectfully, feeling a sense of pride that was quiet but deep. This was more than validation. It was proof that preparation, knowledge, and focus could overcome assumptions and prejudice. The commander's recognition made it clear that she had earned a place not just in the store, but in the wider community of skilled shooters. As he left, the store erupted quietly with murmurs of admiration. Customers who had doubted her now openly discussed her skill. Some even approached her to ask for tips on practice and handling firearms. Emily patiently shared her knowledge, careful to emphasize responsibility, respect, and discipline. She wasn't just demonstrating skill. She was inspiring others to learn and take firearms seriously. By the time Emily finally left the store that day, she had not only purchased her rifle, but she had also gained something far more valuable: recognition, respect, and the quiet knowledge that she could face doubt and skepticism with calm and skill, and emerge victorious. The experience left her confident, humble, and motivated, knowing that her abilities had been acknowledged by peers, strangers, and even a respected commander. It was a day that none of the observers would forget. Emily had turned mockery into admiration, skepticism into respect, and in the process, she had proven that true skill and discipline can speak louder than assumptions, appearances, or gender. After the commander left the store, Emily could feel the shift in the atmosphere more clearly than ever. What had started as whispers, mocking laughter, and skeptical glances had transformed into quiet admiration and genuine respect. The energy of the store felt different, as though a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The people who had doubted her now seemed unsure of how to respond to someone they had underestimated so completely. Emily remained calm, knowing that humility was just as important as skill. She didn't need to announce her victory. Her actions had already spoken louder than words ever could. Customers who had previously snickered or dismissed her now approached carefully, some with curiosity, others with genuine interest. A few of the men who had laughed at her initial questions were lingering near the range, clearly fascinated by her composure and precision. "Can you show me that stance again?" one young man asked hesitantly, holding a notebook as if he wanted to take notes. Emily smiled politely and walked back to the range, demonstrating her stance with the same care she had shown before. She emphasized balance, breathing control, and focus, explaining each detail in simple, understandable terms. The young man watched intently, his earlier doubts completely gone. The older customer who had muttered about her decades of experience now stepped forward. "I can't believe it," he said softly, shaking his head. "I've been around guns for most of my life, and I've never seen anyone handle one with this kind of calm and skill at such a young age." Emily nodded respectfully, quietly acknowledging the compliment. She didn't gloat or boast, knowing that the lesson of the day was about respect, knowledge, and preparation, not self-promotion. Even the store staff, who had initially been dismissive, were now fully engaged. The employee who had laughed when she first asked about a rifle now looked genuinely impressed. "You've got a steady hand," he said, nodding. "And your knowledge. I didn't expect someone your age to know so much about rifles and safety." Emily simply thanked him politely, her focus never leaving the demonstration she was giving. She continued showing how to handle the rifle safely, explaining proper loading, checking the chamber, and keeping the finger off the trigger until ready to fire. Every movement was precise, calm, and deliberate. She emphasized safety at every step, not just as a rule but as a mindset. Observers began to take notes mentally, whispering to one another about how impressive her focus and discipline were. Emily decided to demonstrate accuracy once more. She set up a few practice targets and took aim, firing one shot after another. Each hit landed perfectly on the target. The precision was remarkable, but what stood out most was her calm and consistent technique. Even those who had doubted her earlier were now visibly impressed. Some of the previously skeptical men exchanged glances, clearly realizing that they had misjudged her entirely. A few people began asking questions about her training routine. Emily patiently explained how she practiced regularly, studied firearms in detail, and emphasized mental focus alongside technical skill. She shared tips on posture, breathing, and aim control. For those watching, it wasn't just a lesson in firearms. It was a lesson in discipline, preparation, and perseverance. The young man who had asked about her stance earlier approached her again. "How did you learn to stay so calm under pressure?" he asked. Emily looked at him, thoughtful. "It comes from practice," she said simply. "You have to learn to focus on the task, not on what others think of you. Confidence comes from preparation. If you know your skills and respect what you're doing, the pressure doesn't matter." By this point, the atmosphere in the store had completely changed. People who had once laughed now listened intently. Those who had whispered about her age or appearance were now silent, watching and learning. Even some of the staff began asking more technical questions, seeking advice they might have overlooked before. Emily's quiet demonstration had turned into a full lesson on discipline, knowledge, and respect for firearms. As she packed up her rifle and ammunition at the end of the day, Emily could sense the change in perception. The mockers had been silenced, replaced by people who had been inspired by her skill, composure, and humility. The recognition she had received from the commander earlier had reinforced what her actions were already proving: that knowledge, focus, and respect can overcome prejudice and doubt. Emily left the store not only with her rifle but with a sense of quiet accomplishment. She had faced judgment, ridicule, and skepticism, and had emerged victorious through her actions. She knew that respect earned in this way was far more valuable than any superficial approval or praise. The experience had proven something vital. Skill and discipline speak louder than appearances, and true confidence comes from preparation, knowledge, and humility. As she stepped out into the sunlight, Emily reflected on the day's events. She had walked into the store, underestimated and mocked, and had left with respect, admiration, and validation. The experience was a powerful reminder that determination, focus, and integrity could change the way people saw her, and perhaps even the way they saw others. She felt quietly proud, knowing that she had turned doubt into admiration, skepticism into learning, and mockery into respect. It was a moment that would stay with her forever, not just for the acknowledgement she had received, but for the lesson it taught, that true ability and dedication can break through even the strongest assumptions and judgments. Emily had faced a challenge, remained composed, and emerged as a figure of quiet authority and inspiration. The store, once a place of skepticism and mockery, had become a place of respect and recognition, and she had made it happen through her own skill and perseverance. Emily stood at the entrance of the gun store, the rifle she had come to buy safely packed in her case. The morning had started with doubt, skepticism, and whispers, but it was ending in respect, admiration, and recognition. She could still feel the energy of the store behind her. The quiet conversations, the thoughtful glances, the newfound respect in the eyes of the staff and customers who had once doubted her. It was a moment of quiet triumph, one earned through patience, knowledge, and unwavering focus. As she walked toward the door, Emily reflected on everything that had happened that day. She remembered the condescending smiles and mocking laughter that greeted her when she first entered. She remembered the way people whispered and assumed she lacked the knowledge or skill to handle a firearm safely. But she had remained calm, confident, and prepared. Every question she asked, every technique she demonstrated, and every shot she fired had been deliberate. She had relied on knowledge, preparation, and respect for the craft rather than anger or pride. The commander's presence earlier had been unexpected but transformative. His acknowledgement had been more than just a gesture. It had been validation from someone whose experience and judgment carried weight far beyond the store. The salute he had given her was a symbol of respect earned through action, and it had shifted the perception of everyone present. Emily realized that recognition from someone like him was rare, and it reaffirmed the importance of being prepared, focused, and disciplined in everything she did. She noticed the staff gathered near the counter, quietly discussing her performance. The man who had laughed at her earlier approached cautiously, a small smile on his face. "I underestimated you," he admitted. "You've shown skill, knowledge, and discipline that I wouldn't have expected. Well done." Emily nodded politely, feeling a quiet satisfaction. She didn't need to argue or prove anything further. Her actions had spoken for themselves. A few customers lingered, some openly complimenting her technique, others asking questions about her practice routines. Emily answered each one with patience, explaining the importance of preparation, safety, and focus. She emphasized that handling a firearm was about respect and discipline, not showing off. The people who had once mocked her were now listening intently, some even taking notes mentally. She had transformed the store from a place of doubt into a place of learning and respect. Emily paused for a moment and looked around the store. She saw a shift in the atmosphere that went beyond individual recognition. What had started as skepticism and judgment had evolved into curiosity, respect, and inspiration. People who had doubted her had witnessed her competence firsthand. She had turned assumptions into lessons, ridicule into admiration, and judgment into acknowledgement. That realization filled her with a quiet, steady pride, not arrogance, but satisfaction in knowing that preparation and integrity could overcome bias. As she stepped outside, the sunlight hit her face, warm and reassuring. Emily walked down the street, the rifle case in one hand and a sense of accomplishment in the other. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Countless hours of study, practice, and discipline. She thought about the doubts she had faced and the way she had remained focused, calm, and composed under observation. Every challenge she had encountered that day had tested not only her skill but her patience and confidence. Emily understood that the true victory wasn't just the acknowledgement from the commander or the admiration from the store. It was the validation of her own preparation and perseverance. She had proved to herself that she could remain calm, composed, and capable in the face of doubt and mockery. She had turned a challenging situation into an opportunity to demonstrate not only skill but character. As she walked, she realized that this experience would stay with her forever. It wasn't just a story of buying a rifle. It was a story of proving herself in the face of judgment, of turning doubt into respect, and of showing that true competence and discipline speak louder than assumptions. Emily knew that the lessons she had learned today, patience, preparation, focus, and humility, would guide her in every future challenge. By the time she reached her car, Emily felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had entered the store as a young woman who was underestimated, and she was leaving as someone respected, recognized, and quietly celebrated. The experience had been more than just about firearms. It had been about demonstrating the power of knowledge, focus, and self-confidence. It had been about showing that skill and preparation could change perceptions, earn respect, and inspire others. Emily placed the rifle case in the back seat of her car and took a moment to breathe deeply. The day had tested her in ways she had anticipated and in ways she hadn't. She had faced skepticism, condescension, and mockery, and she had emerged with recognition and respect. The commander's salute, the admiration of the staff and customers, and her own quiet confidence were proof that true preparation, discipline, and humility can overcome assumptions and doubt. As she drove away, Emily felt inspired not only for herself but for anyone who might face similar challenges. She knew that appearances, age, or gender should never define a person's skill or worth. Today had shown that knowledge, preparation, and composure could transform perception and earn genuine respect. The lesson was clear. Stay focused, stay prepared, and let your actions speak louder than words. Emily smiled quietly as the car merged into traffic. The rifle was safely secured, her respect had been earned, and she carried with her the knowledge that she had faced doubt, handled it with grace and skill, and come out stronger on the other side. It had been a day of growth, validation, and quiet triumph, a day she would never forget.